the Florida Writer Podcast, a discussion about writing and other things.
Hello, and welcome to another edition of the Florida Writer Podcast with your host, Alison Nissen, who is dealing with a rough voice today. Today, I am so lucky to be introducing Tim O'Leary. Tim, could you give us a 60-second elevator pitch about who you are and what you write?
Sure. Thanks, Alison. I am primarily a short story writer, though I have a novel coming out next year. But I have written two collections of short stories. One is called Cheney Shot Me in the Face, and the newest one is Men Behaving Badly, which just came out last month. And I have a Corona-themed book, The Coronaverse, is coming out later this year. I live in the Pacific Northwest, and I tend to write sort of male characters. Most of the stories have been in different publications, and I put them together in collections.
So the Coronaverse, I'm going to guess that's about the virus.
Yeah, the thing that happened was I was actually working on a novel that I was in edit on when the pandemic occurred, and so I had to stop that and write all about what was going on. And it's a series of linked short stories that take place in a fictitious town called Santa Ynez. And so the characters reoccur. I was very concerned at the time with some of the sort of the social themes going on during Corona, and some of them are funny. Initially, when it came out, people were like, I don't think we're ready for a comedy about COVID, but I think it's aged pretty well now, and the publisher felt it was a good time to come out with it. So that'll be out in April.
Well, that sounds fun. It was such a memorable time for everybody.
Yeah, and just a very juicy literary time, because it kind of felt we were all like we were all existing in a video game. And so I kind of wanted to capture those moments, and I was very overwhelmed with them. And of course, I had a lot of time to sit and write, so it worked out well for me.
You know, as you're speaking, I'm thinking that during the pandemic, we all now have stories, and it reminds me of it's like when women give I'm saying this wrong. When women give birth, they have those birthing stories forever, and they talk about them all the time. I can speak from experience, but I think that's what this is going to be, is we all just have these stories that'll just keep going and going and going.
Yeah, the monumental, depending what age you were, where were you when Kennedy was assassinated? Where were you when the Twin Towers came down? We're all going to have big stories about this from a wide variety of perspectives. I think the book captures that. I had friends. I had one friend who lost both her father and her brother, and a very sad situation. And then I had other people that kind of coasted through it in sort of funny ways. And so it was kind of a lesson in extremes.
Exactly. Tell me about the very first series of stories that you published.
Well, what happened was I had been in the advertising business for a long time. I was a creative director and wrote a lot in the advertising business. And one day, over a decade ago, I was incorrectly diagnosed with cancer, and they told me I had very serious lung cancer. Took a little while to sort that out and find out that it was an incorrect diagnosis. But when that happened, and I had written nonfiction, and of course, advertising for a long time, I'd written a nonfiction book. I decided, hey, the universe is telling me something here. So I went back to school, got my MFA, because I just wanted to write fiction. And I started writing short stories, which was something I'd never done. I'd always kind of thought of being a fiction writer as writing novels, but I really enjoyed the format, and it was very fulfilling for me. And shortly after I got out of the MFA program, I published a collection of 18 stories. The lead one is called Cheney Shot Me in the Face, which was based on an interaction I had with Dick Cheney. It kind of envisions, we all know Dick Cheney shot somebody in the face, but what if he shot a lot of people in the face? What if he was a serial face shooter? And so it's I tend to write about men in unusual situations. I write a lot of comedy, but there's certainly some seriousness involved. And I just found the short story became a great outlet for me to kind of envision, in my everyday life, what if this happened or what if that happened? And I always tended to kind of live in my own head that way. So the stories run the gamut, but there's a lot of socially themed stories. There's a story about a guy who dates a Facebook profile. I deal with technology quite a bit. Just kind of taking what we all encounter on an everyday basis to sometimes absurd levels or frightening levels. And after that book, then I still had more stories to tell in that vein. And as time went by, and Men Behaving Badly is kind of the logical follow-up to that. It's 10 stories that are kind of in the same vein. Men kind of dealing with aging, with a lot of different situations that you kind of hit in sort of middle age and later in life.
Do you publish these stories strictly in an anthology, or do you also try to publish them in magazines and other places?
I typically kind of put them out in magazines, themed anthologies, sometimes literary journals, sort of to get a feel for them. They tend to because some of the themes, for instance, I have a story that just went in an Ursula Le Guin anthology, a tribute to Ursula Le Guin, called Homeless Gary Busey. And it's got a bit of it's about a homeless guy in Portland, and it's got a bit of a supernatural theme to it that the editors felt kind of was Le Guin-like in some ways. So yeah, if I see a theme journal, or I have publishers come to me looking for certain kinds of work when they know that I have different kinds of work that way.
Let's talk about the writing funny, so to speak. You mentioned that some of your work is comedic. I assume that that's not as in like a stand-up, but as in the irony vein. Would that be true?
Exactly. It tends to be dark, dark comedy, and even in some of the very serious pieces, there is some comedy within that, which I think is pretty typical of life. But I just find myself drawn to that. I would say in either of the collections, probably half the stories have some sort of comedic bent to them.
How do you add the comedy or the comedic bend to them? Like, what's a strategy other writers could employ to do that?
Well, I tend to start with, let's take the Dick Cheney case. I tend to start with a theme, and I have absolutely no idea where I'm going. But in that case, I was in Jackson Hole, Wyoming, and I ran into Dick Cheney at an event. And I got very curious about him, and I researched him, and I thought, what do I want to say about Dick Cheney? I mean, he's an easy character from both a comedic and from a serious perspective. But what happened was, when I researched him, I realized there's all kinds of things at the time that people didn't know about him, that he'd been a draft dodger, and that he'd flunked out of school, and he'd had all these kinds of issues. And I realized in some ways he's a funny character. If you fictionalize this guy, he would be funny. And a movie came out shortly after that did that. to a certain extent. And so I decided I'm going to write a piece where everything about Dick Cheney is true, but I'm going to wrap it in a much more palatable and entertaining format. So the story is told from the perspective of a high school friend of his who gets kind of pulled back into his orbit. And that allowed me to put in a lot of what I thought was very fun dialogue and characters, but sticking to the theme that everything has to be true except the narrator. And I am a big lover of dialogue from a comedic perspective. I think that's something writers can look at is if you build that funny character and they tell the story in a funny way, they can make almost, you can insert comedy into almost any kind of story.
I love that strategy of you stick with the truth and then you just change one part of it. And you're, in this case, the character, the narrator. So that's very clever. I like it a lot. So tell me about hooks for books.
Okay. So I went to the University of Montana, and I grew up in Montana, and they had a very esteemed writing program there. When I first went there as an undergraduate, there was pretty much every great writer was making the pilgrimage to speak or to teach, and it was the second MFA program in the United States. It was always kind of a top 10 program, and over the years it got neglected, and as a state institution it got a lot of its funding pulled. And I was friends with a lot of the professors there, and a lot of Missoula, Montana, where it's located, is sort of a great haven of writers. There's a lot of terrific people that live there and kind of make that their home. So it's an incredibly literary community. I was very sad to see the program being basically defunded out of business, and it made no sense because I think it's probably the most selective program of any program in the Montana university system. I think they only take about 8% of applicants, something like that, and it's a small program. And so a buddy and I decided that we would do what we could to save it financially. And the logical thing for us, both being fly fishermen, and a lot of the writers that live in Missoula spend a lot of time on the river, and it's amazing how many Western writers at one time or other, because it's so difficult to make your money writing, worked as fishing guides or outdoor guides or that kind of thing. So we hold an annual fishing event, and people come in from all over the country. Sells out every year, and we raise quite a bit of money for the program. And also we get a lot of people to support the program. So that has really helped make people more aware of the program. And we're going into our third year. Because we brought notoriety to the program, we've been able to get a lot more donations. And I would say the MFA program is really thriving now. If we have writers interested in pursuing an MFA, it's a really good one to look at, and really great staff run by a poet named Chris Dombrowski, who works with me. And so it's been real gratifying, and I go back and work with the MFA program a few times a year. It's something I just really enjoy.
Well, congratulations. That sounds like quite an endeavor, and something that's worthwhile. So, yeah, we writers appreciate your efforts.
Well, it's great. It doesn't take a lot of money to support a writing program. It's not like you need labs or equipment or anything. You just basically need smart people in a room to meet in. And the other part of it is it's been very discouraging to see sort of the arts and liberal arts get defunded and neglected in sort of this new age, I think we take for granted how important it is to have creative people out, putting ideas down on paper. And so I would encourage everybody, if you have a program, if you have a liberal arts program, it's really a great time to support them.
Well, it's interesting. We everyone pushes STEM. We all want the STEM, we push it. But even STEM, you need the creative ideas in order to push the frontier of the sciences.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I just tell people, imagine your life if a lot of people out there that you don't know about weren't creating things for you. There's just so many ways to be creative now, but it starts with words. And whether it's a video game or a novel, it all starts with an idea going down on paper.
Yes, absolutely. Tim O'Leary, how can people learn more about you and your work?
Well, I have a website, timothyolearylit.com, and you can see everything there. There's links to all the books in your favorite bookstores. I have an Amazon page, and people can go there. Hopefully you can go into your local bookstore and find something I've written. And I'm I'll be doing a tour with the new book in April, and that's starting to get set up. And there's a schedule on the website there too that will be evolving. And I would love to have people come out and see me.
A tour, how exciting. That doesn't seem to happen very often anymore.
No, it doesn't, but I really enjoy it. And I try to do indie bookstores, although I do some Barnes and that kind of stuff. But it's pretty gratifying, and it's also a great way to get new material.
Absolutely. That and sitting in an airport for a while.
That's right.
All right, Tim, are you ready to switch to our rapid fire questions?
Yes, I think so. We'll see.
If you were going to live on a secret island, where would it be?
A secret island.
You can pick anywhere. The Caribbean, Alaska, in the middle of Lake Michigan.
Yeah, I think there is a big lake in Montana, in northern Montana, called Flathead Lake, and it has some private islands on it. And because I like that climate so much, and I could get off of it easily to visit civilization, I'd probably live on one of those islands.
All right. What is your favorite breakfast food?
It sounds very old manish, but I like to eat oatmeal with berries.
Oh, not old manish at all. Add a little brown sugar.
Yep, absolutely.
And if you were going to travel on an underwater adventure, what animals would you like to see?
Oh, I'm a big fan of rays, and I think rays are awfully elegant to watch.
Have you ever gone to an aquarium where they have the little pools of rays and they'll climb up over the edge and like give you little kisses?
Yes, I love it. I went to a place in Hawaii where the pools were right there, and they would come around and people would feed them. I don't know if that's environmentally correct, but it was interesting to see.
Well, Tim O'Leary, thank you so much for stopping by.
Thank you. I really appreciate it.
You have been listening to another edition of the Florida Writer Podcast with your host, Alison Nissen. Alison out. Woo! We're all done.
Thanks, Alison. That was fun.
Born in Billings, Montana, Tim O'Leary is the author of Warriors, Workers, Whiners, and Weasels, Dick Cheney Shot Me in the Face, Men Behaving Badly, and the forthcoming book, Coronaviruses. to be released in 2024. He graduated from the University of Montana and received an MFA from Pacific University. Tim and his wife Michelle and their yellow lab split their time between Washington State and California. Discover more at timothyolearylit.com. For more information about the Florida Writers Association, visit us at floridawriters.org. Until next time.